Welcome into the M&M Discipleship Podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a disciple of Christ. We aim to look for God in our daily lives, be in His Word, and strive to live out the teachings of Jesus. This is Michael Round, and this is my co-host, Dakota Moody. Dakota, how's it going?
It is going fantastic, brother. Obviously, we're recording this Wednesday before this comes out, but this last Sunday, which was it the 7th, 6th, 8th? 8th. I think it was the 8th, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We had 126 people at our congregation on Sunday, which was a absolutely blessed time. Kind of when we got here about a year ago, I think the average Sunday was probably in the high 60s to low 70s. So to see where everything has gone in the year that we've been here, it's been a huge blessing to have that many people. Obviously, it was a great weekend as well, and for a lot of things, football related as well. But I won't go too deeply into that. But yes, it was just a blessed weekend. It really was in a lot of ways. So blessed time. And you know what? It's like I'm gonna check the temperature right now. I'm pretty sure it's in like the low 70s right now. And actually, it's 67 right now outside, which is just.
Well, it's been a lot more pleasant. It
Man,
feels like fall is in the air.
It's the best. It's just the best right now. I mean, again, this is the best time of the year. I don't care what anyone says. It's the best time of the year.
Easily.
Yes.
It's not even close.
In my humble opinion. I think your wife would disagree, though, because she's all about that Christmas.
Well, I can spin it that way, though. And I've said it before on this podcast. Fall is great because Christmas is also on the horizon. So, it's coming.
That's the one negative for me, but we continue on. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful time of year. It really is. And it's just so many blessings right now. Michael, how are you this morning?
I'm good, man. Yeah, we've had a great couple of weeks, a lot of busy things going on. Just life, man. It's gotten faster, it seems like. We have a lot going on at church, a lot of things up in the air, but for the most part, very good things. And so we got some excitement building, and I'm hoping we'll be able to make some of those things public before too long. But yeah, a lot of good things going.
That's great. A lot of positive things right now. It's just a great time. It really is just a great time for a lot of reasons. And we're just going to completely ignore all the election stuff and just focus on the good things in life and just keep moving along in that way. So we're just going to keep doing that.
Yeah, the presidential debate was last night based on, where we're at on this.
Where we're recording.
When we're recording, yeah. And it's something. That's,
Something is
something.
A word for it. Something is.
I will say this. We watched a good portion of it, and
why would you do that?
It's almost comedic. It really is at this point. But you laugh so you don't cry because this is where we're at as a country. But anyways, we were talking a moment ago on a more serious note. We were talking a moment ago. It's 9/11 today, and how wild it is that was 23 years ago, and what a tragic event that took place. And there really hasn't been an event like it since in our country, and I certainly hope there isn't one for a very long time, if ever, in our country's history.
You talk about kind of the most earth-shaking events in U.S. history. It's got to be top 5. I mean, it's got to be up there. Pearl Harbor probably, and be a few other events. But it's just yeah. There's just so much when it comes to that the idea of how old we were when that happened, and the fact that it's still something that I can remember. It's literally one of my earliest memories that day.
I would say for me too.
Yeah. Even though we were both, knee high to a grasshopper, as the old Southern expressions goes. And yet it's still something I remember to this day. Everything that happened, a lot of things that happened on that day. And, we continue to pray for our country, pray for those who are still strict, because that's the incredibly kind of terrible thing with this is there's still people struggling with this, not just those who lost family members, obviously, but those who have gotten cancers and diseases from being first responders, being on the scene for these events. And so,
one thing too,
continue to pray for them.
Definitely, that's something that occurred, and it's pretty rare that we have acts of terror on our soil, but there are people in Ukraine, people in Israel, people there that are being attacked on a daily basis. And and dealing with things just like that consistently. And it's tragic that goes on in our world today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, to the we are very sheltered from these things.
Hmm.
We don't see them as much, and so that's why it made such an impact on us when it happened. I
I
think
think
in
you're
such a
right.
way, because in so many places in the world, it's just a kind of a daily reality.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's something that could happen at any time, and we've certainly
Maybe not
seen
quite
that.
that magnitude, but
Yeah,
something, of that variety.
yeah. I mean, I think we've seen that just within the last couple of years between, the as you mentioned, Ukraine and all the events that have happened in Israel and the Middle East. It's just, yeah.
Hmm. Where I've seen God is actually a little more somber this week. We've had a number of people lose family members, and
Mm.
um, that is sad and that is difficult to deal with. But where I've seen God is peace that He gives families. The people that have lost loved ones have lost loved ones who are going on to be with the Lord. And we know that God is with us and giving us peace in those moments. And we can trust that those family members are with the Lord. And so that's a beautiful thing. It's melancholic, it's bittersweet. It's hard to wrestle with. But when we're in those situations and we can feel God's presence, that's a special thing. So that's where I've seen God. And I know that that's kind of connected to some of the events going on, but where at least how I'm thinking about it. But where is it that you've seen God this past week?
Mm. Well, for me, I try to bring things up a little bit from the mood. But as I mentioned, we had a lot of people there on at our congregation on Sunday, which was a great thing, and thing that was kind of bittersweet for us is we had a family who is going to be leaving this congregation to go and do some work in the community at another church. And so they're leaving our congregation. They're great servants, great workers, do so much for this congregation. So they're going to be missed in that way. But a place that I've seen God is the fact that if you had asked me 2 weeks ago when we knew that they were going to be leaving, if we were going to have the people step up to help fill their spots and kind of use this kind of almost a fresh start to be able to take our church into the next um next age, I guess you could call it, and what we're needing to do with both children's and youth ministry. And I would have told you I don't think we would have had those people. Like I didn't see the kind of help
Hmm.
here because people hadn't signed up for teaching classes, people hadn't want to help in this way and that way. But then within the last 2 weeks, we've had people come out of nowhere and say, "Hey, I want to help teach the children's classes. Hey, I want to help with this. I want to help with that." And in a way, like I said, in a way in which I couldn't have conceived 2 weeks ago, a way I wish there's no way I would have thought would have happened. But multiple people have volunteered to step up and help in these ways, and that's huge. That's I think so important for us here to be able to see that. And again, where I've seen God in that is God has been working on their hearts clearly, because this is
Hmm.
not a situation where again they didn't show any wish, want, or desire to be involved in these ways, and then all of a sudden, bam, they want to step in, they want to help, they want to do these things. How awesome is that? Clearly, God has been working in their life. Clearly, God has been working behind the scenes to help them and to come to that realization that they can help serve this congregation. And that's exactly what they're going to do. And it's so great.
Yeah, and one thing that we forget is that God wants people more than we want people. He loves
Mm,
people more than we do.
that's
And
right.
he is, as you said, working in the background, working on people's hearts. And what a beautiful thing that is. And that really goes along with what we're going to study today from the Bible. It's, where there isn't as much drama or high key information or things going on, and yet there's still important people that are serving the Lord. So, Dakota, could you read Judges chapter 10, verses 1 through 5?
I absolutely can. Judges chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. And it reads, After Abimelech, there arose to save Israel Tola, the son of Puah, son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, and he lived at Shamer in the hill country of Ephraim. And he judged Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. After him rose Jair, the Gileadite, who judged Israel 22 years. And he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys, and they had 30 cities called Havoth Jair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Kaman.
All right. So as we read this, there's not much said about him.
No.
We read a lot about Abimelech and how wicked a leader he was, but now we have Tola and Jair. So what does that say to you, Dakota, that, there's 45 years here that go on and there isn't much said about them?
Yeah, I mean, this is a long time period. I mean, you got your 23 years and then another 22 years after that. I mean, that's a long time period in Israel for things to have happened. And we don't really read much, but apparently things went pretty well to
Yeah.
the point where these things happen. But I guess nothing necessarily that significant. But, that's the thing is a lot of times in the Bible, we can see these kind of jumps in time. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't important stuff happening. It
Mm,
doesn't mean that there wasn't great things that were happening. And clearly, after, and I think this is kind of important, after a reign like Abimelech's, where things were very chaotic, very hectic, very evil, a lot of different things going on, it's nice to have the kind of, I'm sure it would have been very nice to have the just consistent
mhm.
leadership of these people, Tola and Jair, for them to be able to lead and guide Israel kind of back and be the people who they needed to be in leadership and help the Israel to just be on a consistent, faithful path, at least for this time period. And I think, that's something that's important for us to realize. And there doesn't always have to be like major events happening all the time for God's will to be done. Because
Yep.
we don't see that. We're not reading of these, oh, there's this huge battle and this person killed this many people and all this stuff. It was, they reigned, they lived, they died. And
Yeah.
God was blessed in that time. Well, God was worshipped and Israel was blessed. And that's
Well,
simplicity.
and we are so far removed from the Bible that we sometimes forget what is going on or what isn't.
Yeah.
We got 45 years here. But what we do have is Tola saved Israel. And so
Yeah.
there's a period of prosperity. Jair, he judged Israel, it says. So I don't know. Generally speaking, though, in the book of Judges, when they're judging, that means it's a high point or at least a peaceful
Hmm.
point. But I wanna lay this aside next to like what we see in the book of Acts. The book of Acts, we need to realize, is a lot like social media. It's a lot like a highlight reel. We have 30 years covered in the book of Acts, but it's in 28 chapters, and it makes it seem like it's a week.
Yeah.
But it's 30 years. Like, think about this. What are the best events that have happened in your church in the last 30 years? You could come up with a great highlight reel. I mean, they would not necessarily be just like the book of Acts, but so time is such a funny thing in all the events going on because I know I feel this like low grade pressure that Pentecost needs to happen every week.
Yeah.
Or that's got to be a regular occurrence at your church, and it's just not that way. There was one Pentecost, and it was monumental. And there are events like that that go on around the world, and that's special, and we should pray for that. But don't get lost in the time markers in the scripture, and don't overlook times like this where not much is said, but there's still a lot going on that's positive. And the last thing I'll say on this is, when it comes to the end of your life, there might not be a lot of like flashy moments, a lot of great things, but if you can live a life faithful to God, that's a life worth living.
Yeah. A life of sound, consistent faith speaks much louder than a life full of, you could
Yeah.
say, spiritual roller coasters, maybe.
Yeah. And that's the thing is a lot of those highs, have lows with them. You
Yeah.
think about the Apostle Peter and all that he went through.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Very true. So I think that's something that we're all going to have different experiences in our life of faith, but some of us are going to have the experiences of a Gideon. Some of us are going to have the experiences of a Tola and Jair. And
Mm.
honestly, you may be a little bit more blessed to have the experience of a Tola and Jair. It's that nice, consistent level of faith continuing through. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
absolutely.
So Dakota, what is it that you've been reading lately?
Yeah, so last time we met a couple weeks ago, we talked about how I had been reading again through The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. It's something that I just like to do every now and then because it helps to center me back, get me back into some practices, some things that just helped to build solid faith for me and helps me a lot. And last time I talked about prayer, the importance of prayer, how we can kind of lose the importance of prayer sometimes. And this week he talks about the discipline of simplicity in this chapter that I'm reading this week. And really, when he's talking about simplicity, there's two things that he's kind of talking about. Number one, he's talking about he's talking about simplicity as it regards things, but also simplicity as it regards what we've got going on in our life. And I think this
Mm,
is really important for us kind of in modern day America to think about because it's really hard for us to find simplicity.
mm,
There's so many things vying for our attention, so many things that kind of demand our attention in so many ways. Um, our focus can get shifted and we can lose focus on the things that are important. And he says this in on page 80 in this book. It says, because we lack a divine center, our need for security has led us to an insane attachment to things. And I think this is
mm,
very important when we talk about things or when we talk about things in our life. Um, that if we don't have that divine center, if we don't come back and say everything that truly matters in my life is centered on
mm,
my identity as a Christian and an identity as a Christ follower, then what we do is we stack our identity in the things of the world. And what happens when those things fall, decay, corrode, don't disappoint? They're naturally going to take our identity, our sense of self, our sense of who we are with it, and we end up losing ourselves. And that's where he talks about that as important with the idea of things, not only, the things we buy, but I think the things that we do. This can, by the way, even be, I think, up to, uh, again, I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to say much, but I even think this could be like your kids. You're obviously going to prioritize your kids, but like what happens when your kid's sports schedule makes it so that way you can't be a faithful Christian? What is it when, as it regards your job, what happens when your career is taking you away from being a truly faithful Christian? And I think
mm,
that's the things that's challenging. But there's so many things that are vying for our attention, especially now with our phone, social media, and also with social media influencing the things that we own and things that we do, what we have to have, what we should have at this stage in our life, and blah blah blah. And he just reminds me in that chapter, and I want to relay this to everybody else because I think it's so important. Everything needs to always be centered around our identity as Christians. And once we start stacking our identity and other things, when we start allowing other things to influence everything about our life, man,
mm.
can it really cause our life to take a downturn in a lot of ways. And so let's look for, I think the challenge that I would have for this is just let's look for how we can get back to our center, which is the most
Mm.
important thing, which is Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there about, all the things that truly matter in our life are rooted in our identity in Christ. I always thought you mentioned sports. I never envisioned a day when I wouldn't play football or play basketball consistently. And it's like
Mm.
I may pick up a football once a year, or I may shoot basketball, infrequently. And even playing sports as an adult, it's just different. You can do it sometimes, but and it may be a hobby of yours, but it's not a part of your life anymore the way it used to be. And
Yeah.
there are certain things like that. There may be a job or whatever, that a relationship that you like, I can never envision my life without this person. And one day that person or that job is gone.
Hmm.
Um, just being mindful of all those things and how they move and they're elusive, and yeah, we need to
Yeah.
make sure our identity's in Christ. And
Absolutely.
that kind of is similar to what I've been reading, been continuing through, Is God Real? And I've really been enjoying that book.
Mm.
And a part of that, he interviews Dr. Chad Meister, and he talks about the apologetics pyramid. And so envision different levels of a pyramid, and he walks through how just thinking through these things, it points to Christ.
Mm.
Starts off with, is there truth? Is truth even something that can be found? Is there such a thing as absolute truth? And of course there is. Then he lays out how there are different worldviews. There are different ways to look at the world: atheism, pantheism, and theism. Basically, there's no God, everything's God, or there's a God, or um, yeah, maybe a couple gods, but not everything is God. And he adds that theism is the most logical one, it's the most livable one. And there's a lot more that goes into each of these things. You have to really get into it. But one thing I'll say is atheism isn't livable.
Hmm.
If you follow the atheistic line of thinking, if we're just all accidents, if we're just basically one scientific evolutionary accident, then it doesn't matter if, and he talks about like killing children or torturing children for fun. It doesn't matter that I do that. There's nothing wrong with that because we're
Hmm.
just animals. We can act like animals. It's not livable. It doesn't make sense. We know that not to be true. We have morals and a conscience. And so theism is the most livable among the options. And then the question is like, well, which God is real? And there are different things that go with that, and he proves and supports the fact that Yahweh God is real, and that he has communicated to us specifically through his son, and building on that his son was raised from the dead. And at the very top of that pyramid is the gospel message that God extends to all of us. And so I would challenge you to pick up a book like Is God Real by Lee Strobel. And so you can begin to develop lines of argumentation for whether or not there's a God, why our God exists and other gods don't, and specifically how it all points to the fact that Jesus is the Son of God, that he died and that he was raised on the third day. And he offers good news to us to where we, like Dakota said, can root our identity in him and the blessings that he offers.
Hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah, I think when we talk about there's a lot of things we can talk about with apologetics, and I think obviously that book is full of them.
Yeah.
That and his other books, Case for Christ, he does such good things in that way. But there's just so many different ways in which I think we can point to the fact that our God is real, that our God is living and active in the world, and that our God wants us to be with Him. Um,
Mhm.
and I hope that everybody can find things like what Mike was reading right now, maybe that book or other books that can help to do this, because I what I want Christians to do is get to a point where we aren't just like, well, you atheists are just stupid because you don't believe in a God. Well, that's not we let's do this in a way that, as Colossians tells us, season with salt.
Yeah.
Let's season our speech with salt. Let's go to people and talk to them with grace and be able to deliver these things to them with, you don't have to have the highest measure of intellectual conversation, but we all have things that we experience and know about in our world that we can make reference to that can show people our God. And that's
Mhm.
that's my hope, is we can get to that, and people like Lee Strobel and others can help in this way.
Yeah. And the thing is people come to atheism from all different paths.
Mm,
It may even be that they, for much of their life, believed in God, and then something tragic happened to them. And so, it's not just that they're dumb or
yeah,
that they're this or that. Often, some of the smartest people
yeah,
are atheists, and so not that every smart person is, but because there's obviously a lot of brilliant Christians. But be mindful, and Stephen Covey talks about something in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so if you're
mm,
talking with someone, especially someone that you have a long-term relationship with that you could actually influence, try and understand where they're coming from. And then you might see the root thing that you need to study about and help talk to them through, walk them through. So yeah, I really agree with that admonition, Dakota.
mm, absolutely. Well, and Michael, is there anything else before we head out today?
No, I just hope y'all have a great week.
Absolutely. Yeah. We hope God blesses you all and all of your efforts, especially your efforts to be disciples of Christ in that way. And we hope that this podcast has helped you to get to that point. As always, if you have any comments, questions, you're welcome to deliver some feedback back to us. So any um, recommendations that you can give to your friends or family for the M&M Discipleship Podcast, always appreciated. But for now, we want to thank you all for joining us today on the M&M Discipleship Podcast. Until next time, let's look for God, learn from His Word, and live out His teachings.